They came in the middle of the night. A rusty tow truck, two men in fake uniforms, and my Tesla chained like stolen property. Behind them stood Karen, the HOA president, smirking like she already won. But what they didn't know was this. I'm a U.S. Marshal, and that night, everything changed. Please subscribe for support and comment me. Where are you watching from? The afternoon sun hung heavy in the sky, pressing down on the quiet streets of Greenfield. The kind of light that makes the pavement shimmer, where every shadow feels sharper than it should. My Tesla sat in the driveway, gleaming silver, calm and proud like it belonged there. To me, it wasn't just a car. It was the one indulgence I allowed myself, a symbol of years spent chasing fugitives across state lines, of nights spent away from home. It was more than metal and wheels. It was proof that after decades of chaos, I had finally built something steady, something mine. I didn't know it then, but that car would become the stage for betrayal, humiliation, and a fight I never asked for but couldn't walk away from. I remember standing at the window that day, coffee in hand, watching the world go by, expecting nothing more dramatic than the sound of kids riding bikes or the bark of a neighbor's dog. But then I saw them. A rusty flatbed tow truck nosed into my driveway, blocking my Tesla like a predator cornering prey. The truck door creaked open, and two men stepped out, broad and heavy, the kind of men who looked like they were hired for their size rather than their sense. They moved with a casual arrogance, as if they had already claimed what wasn't theirs. Behind them, standing with her arms crossed, was the president of our HOA, Karen Kyle. She wore a pink visor tilted low, a tennis skirt like she was headed for a friendly match, but her eyes, cold and unblinking, told another story. She didn't come to play. She came to win. I felt the silence in that moment, the kind of silence that weighs on your chest before the storm breaks. Danielle, my wife, stood behind me, her gaze fixed on the scene. She didn't need to speak. The way her hand tightened on the back of my arm told me everything. Her worry, her anger, her disbelief that it had come to this. It was a gaze moment, one of those rare times when words fall short and silence carries all the weight. She knew this wasn't about a car. It was about control. That's what Karen wanted. Control. She had been chipping away at us since the day we moved in. Petty fines for a hose not coiled correctly. Imaginary violations about lawn aesthetic imbalance. At first, I paid them, thinking it would keep the peace. But peace isn't what she wanted. Power was. And when power is threatened, it always finds new ways to strike. This time, it struck at the thing I valued most. The Tesla became her target. My symbol of calm turned into a symbol of defiance. And standing there, watching those men circle it with their hooks and chains, I realized Karen wasn't just testing me. She was daring me. The truck's cheap magnetic sign read, HOA Security, letters peeling at the corners. But the way those men carried themselves, the mismatched uniforms, the fake armbands, the prison tattoo peeking out of one collar, made it clear. They weren't real security. They weren't cops. They were muscle. Hired hands. Pretenders playing dress-up with stolen authority. Danielle raised her phone and started streaming. Not out of habit, but out of instinct. In my world, what you can prove matters more than what you know. And this needed proof. Viewers started climbing almost instantly, neighbors whispering in the comments, watching in real time as something ugly unfolded on their street. I stepped out into the sun. The screen door slammed behind me, sharp and deliberate. No words, just sound. I wasn't wearing my usual weekend clothes. I'd chosen something else, something that mattered. A plain black shirt with bold white letters across the chest, U.S. Marshal. Not a costume. Not a threat, a truth. One that carried the weight of years of service, of arrests made, of fugitives who thought they could run but couldn't hide. Karen saw it. She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into that smirk of hers. It was the smirk of someone who believed she was untouchable. She called out from the sidewalk, her voice sharp and dismissive, "That shirt doesn't mean anything here." But her eyes flicked to her watch, as if everything was unfolding right on schedule. That's what struck me most. She planned this. Every second of it. The bigger of the two men stepped closer, his smirk matching hers. Private community. Her rules, he said, tugging at his fake armband like it meant something. His words were casual, but his stare was loaded, daring me to push back. The other one, quiet and watchful, started fiddling with the toe chain, pretending not to listen. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, not from fear, but from something deeper, something familiar. The kind of pulse you get when the line between order and chaos thins, when you realize you're seconds away from having to act. My training told me to stay calm, to keep the record clean. But another part of me, the part that knew predators when he saw them, told me this wasn't going to end with words. Danielle's voice crackled through the earpiece. "We're at 100 viewers." Her tone was steady, but I could hear the urgency. "Tony's in the comments. He says this looks like a new reality show." Even in that moment, I almost smiled. Tony, the nosy neighbor 3 doors down, had always been watching. Tonight, he was the neighborhood's unofficial witness. I turned my gaze back to the Tesla. Its silver body gleamed in the sunlight, but for the first time, I didn't see it as just a car. I saw it as bait, a symbol, a stage where truth and lies were about to collide. And in that instant, I understood something. This wasn't about fines or rules or even about Karen. This was about what happens when people in power forget there are limits. When they believe fear can replace law and intimidation can replace justice. What none of them knew, not Karen, not the men she hired, not even the neighbors watching from behind curtains, was that they weren't just trying to take my car. They were about to walk straight into a trap of their own making. But I didn't let it show. I stood there in the heat, feet planted, chest squared to the camera, every movement deliberate, calm, steady, patient. I wasn't just defending a car. I was preparing for something larger, something that would expose every false badge, every fake rule, every ounce of corruption hiding in plain sight. I didn't know then how far this fight would go, or how many nights it would steal from us. But I knew one thing for certain: this story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever been pushed too far, fined for nonsense, silenced by someone who thought their power was absolute. And as those men closed in on my Tesla, and Karen's smirk deepened, I realized this moment, this exact moment, was where everything would begin. The heat pressed down on my shoulders as I stood in the driveway, the Tesla gleaming behind me, Karen smirking from the sidewalk, and her 2 hired men shifting like wolves waiting for the signal to strike. It should have been just another Saturday in Greenfield, but nothing about this scene felt ordinary. The past had finally caught up with me, twisting itself into the present like a shadow that refuses to fade. For years I told myself I wanted quiet, that I was tired of chasing men who thought laws were made for someone else. I thought Greenfield would give me that. A white fence, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving as the sun went down. Danielle believed in that dream even more than I did. But deep down I knew I wasn't built for stillness. My life had always been about conflict, about knowing when to step forward even when stepping forward meant danger. I'd buried those instincts thinking I could trade them for peace. And now here they were, being tested by a woman in a pink visor who believed her rules mattered more than the law itself. As I stood there, I remembered the first warning sign. A year back, not long after we moved in, I came home late one night from a training assignment. Danielle was asleep. The house was quiet. But taped to our front door was a paper citation. Trash bins visible from street. Fine, $25. I laughed at first. It seemed so small compared to the kind of violations I was used to enforcing. Felons skipping court, fugitives hiding across state lines. But when I paid it, Karen noticed. When I stayed quiet, she grew bolder. Small things turned into larger ones. It wasn't just about bins or hoses. It was about testing boundaries. And I had let her see mine. That memory cut sharper now as I watched her tilt her head toward her men, her fingers tapping against her tablet like a queen impatient with her pawns. One of them bent low, hooking the chain under my Tesla's frame. The other, the one with the smirk, blocked my path. He was taller, heavier, a wall of muscle dressed in authority he didn't own. His fake armband looked ridiculous up close, but his stare didn't. He wanted to intimidate me, to make me flinch. He leaned in just enough so I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Back off," he said, his voice low, gravelly, rehearsed. "This is HOA business." I locked my eyes on his. He didn't know it, but I'd seen his type before. Guys who pretended to be lawful but lived on the edges of crime. The prison tattoo peeking from under his collar told me more about him than any badge could. That's when the second hook dropped. Not from him, but from inside me. A flashback so sharp it almost split the moment in two. Years ago, a case in Arizona. A man named Victor Ruiz. He ran a towing scam just like this, only bigger, dirtier. Fake badges, stolen trucks, cars taken from families who could never fight back. I was still green back then, full of energy, thinking justice was always clean. We raided one of his lots in the middle of the night, and I'll never forget the look on a young mother's face when she found her minivan among the stolen vehicles. Her kids' car seats were still inside. She clutched those seats like they were pieces of her children themselves. Ruiz laughed when we cuffed him, said it was just business. That was the day I learned some people don't care about the ruin they leave behind. And some people can only be stopped when you bring the full weight of the law crashing down on them. Looking at Karen now, at her men fumbling with the chain, I realized history wasn't just repeating. It was escalating. Danielle's voice in my ear jolted me back. "We're climbing past 200 viewers, George. Everyone sees this." Her calm tone steadied me. Witnesses mattered. Cameras mattered. Truth mattered. I raised my voice, just enough for the mic to carry. "For the record, I am U.S. Marshal George Matthews. This is a crime in progress." Karen's lips curled, her voice dripping with venom. "You hear that? He's threatening us. He thinks his shirt makes him special. This is private property. My property." Her contradiction was as sharp as her words. She claimed to be protecting the neighborhood, but her motives weren't about safety. They were about dominance. She used the rules like weapons, fines like bullets, and fear like a leash. She dressed it up as order, but it was all about feeding her hunger for power. The man in front of me shifted, blocking my path more aggressively. Behind him, the quiet one, Ricky I'd later learn, stopped pretending. He dropped the chain and walked toward the back of the truck. My gut told me he wasn't grabbing more equipment. My instincts screamed louder than words. And then I saw it, the glint of metal in his hand. A crowbar. He carried it low, trying to be discreet. But under the noon sun on a suburban street, there's no hiding malice. "Viewers are at 300, Danielle whispered. "And climbing. If you think this is just about a car, you're not ready for what comes next." The smirking man laughed when he saw the crowbar. He thought it gave them an edge. 2 against 1 with a weapon in play. He thought they had me. He thought wrong. I didn't move yet. My hands stayed open at my sides, palms visible, calm. My voice stayed even. "You and your friend are about to commit grand theft auto and assault with a deadly weapon. This is your last chance. Walk away." Karen's laugh split the air, high and sharp. "You hear that? He's threatening us." That was the signal. The smirking man shoved me hard in the chest. I stepped back, steadying myself, my feet gripping the pavement. At that same instant, Ricky came around the Tesla with the crowbar raised. The world narrowed. My training took over. I stepped inside his swing, shifted his balance, and with one sharp strike to his jaw, the crowbar clattered to the pavement. I shoved him into his partner, their weight collapsing together like poorly stacked boxes. In seconds, they were both on the ground, groaning, confused, their confidence shattered. Danielle's voice cut in again. 400 viewers. Everyone just saw that. I knelt beside them, checking for injuries, narrating calmly for the live stream. Not out of showmanship, but because I knew perception was power. "I am checking for injuries." "Help is coming!" Karen screamed from the sidewalk. "Assault! He's assaulting them! Arrest him!" But the crowbar on the pavement told a different story, and the camera told the rest. I stood tall, sweat rolling down my back, my eyes locked on Karen. For the first time, her smirk faltered. For the first time, I saw something else in her gaze. Not arrogance, but calculation. When someone who thrives on control realizes they've lost it, that's when the real danger begins. Minutes later, flashing lights cut through the street. Deputies arrived, calm and professional. They saw the scene, 2 men winded and bruised, a crowbar tagged as evidence, a tow truck with fake signs. Karen tried to spin her story, tried to point her finger at me, but the deputy's eyes told me he wasn't buying it. I showed my credentials, steady hands, calm voice. U.S. Marshal George Matthews. His posture shifted instantly, the weight of recognition settling in. Karen's shrieks grew louder, her words sharper, but they were drowned out by the reality unfolding in front of everyone's eyes. That's when Danielle whispered through my earpiece again. "George, I found something." "That truck? It's not just fake. It's registered to a shell company tied directly to Karen." The words chilled me. This wasn't petty harassment anymore. This was organized, calculated, illegal. She wasn't just writing tickets. She was running an operation, one built on fear and fraud. I looked back at Karen, still shouting, still convinced she was untouchable. She didn't realize yet that the ground beneath her was already cracking. But I knew this wasn't just an HOA squabble anymore. It was a conspiracy, and conspiracies always unravel, but never without blood, noise, and broken lives along the way. The deputies cuffed Ricky and his partner. Their resistance gone, their arrogance drained. The tow truck was impounded, the fake signs peeled off like paper masks. Karen stood there, clutching the citation she was handed, her face red with fury. She thought she could still fight her way out of this. She thought the rules she wrote in her little HOA kingdom mattered more than the law of the land, but I knew better. And as I watched her storm off down the sidewalk, muttering threats, one thought gnawed at me. Karen wasn't finished. She wasn't the type to surrender. She'd come back, louder, sharper, more dangerous. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. And the next move wouldn't be hers alone. The night after the tow truck was hauled away and the two men were cuffed, I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, the silence pressing down heavier than the day's heat ever could. Danielle was upstairs, scrolling through the stream comments, answering neighbors who were shaken, some supportive, some terrified. I stared at the Tesla through the window, parked right where it had been, as if nothing had happened. But nothing about it felt the same anymore. I had faced gunfire before. I had chased fugitives down alleys where one wrong move meant not going home. But this was different. This wasn't about strangers or criminals in distant towns. This was my home, my street, my supposed safe place. And the person who had brought danger right to my door wasn't some gang leader. It was a woman with a visor and a clipboard. The absurdity of it burned in my chest, but so did something else. Doubt. Danielle came down quietly and sat across from me. Her eyes studied me in the dim light. "You did the right thing," she said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "You protected yourself. You protected us." But I couldn't shake the memory of that shove to my chest, the weight of Ricky's crowbar, the split-second decision to strike. Yes, I acted within the law. Yes, the cameras saw everything. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered the question I didn't want to face. What if I had gone too far? What if the line between restraint and force blurred when anger crept in? That was my breaking point. Realizing that even with all my training, the law I swore to uphold, doubt could seep in like water through cracks. I'd always been sure of myself, sure of my choices. Now, I wasn't so sure. The following morning, Danielle pushed the latest stream numbers across the table. Over 1,000 views overnight, dozens of comments. Half the neighborhood knew the truth, but the other half still questioned it. "George," she said firmly, "they need to see you as steady. If Karen tries to twist this, we'll win with evidence. But you have to stay calm. Calm. That word again. The same word I clung to yesterday while two hired men tried to drag away my Tesla. The same word Karen mocked when she laughed at my shirt. Calm had kept me alive. But calm was also what let her push boundaries for so long. That's when a knock sounded at the door. Sharp. Urgent. I opened it to find Tony, our nosy but well-meaning neighbor. He looked restless, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "George," he said, "you might want to see this." He handed me his phone. On it was security footage from his own cameras. Karen, standing in her driveway, slipping a wad of cash to Ricky and his partner days before the attack. And on Ricky's phone, the green glow of an app, Venmo. He wasn't just getting paid. He was showing her proof of payments to someone else. "Inspector," the note read. That word hit me like a punch. "Inspector, It meant Karen wasn't working alone. She had someone on the inside. A city code official, most likely. Someone who could make her fake violations look official. Someone who gave her muscle the paperwork cover they needed. When corruption wears the mask of authority, it's no longer just dangerous, it's almost unstoppable. I leaned back, staring at the footage, the pieces clicking together. Karen wasn't just drunk on HOA power. She had built a pipeline, fake fines, fake tickets, fake cops, all feeding into real consequences. Cars stolen, neighbors scared, people silenced. It was a small empire, and yesterday was proof she was willing to use force to keep it alive. That realization left me with a moral conflict that ate at me all day. Do I strike hard now? Call in every contact, every favor I've earned as a marshal, and crush this scheme before it grows? Or do I wait, build the evidence carefully, let the system handle her, knowing full well she'll keep hurting people in the meantime? The lawman in me knew patience was safer, but the husband, the neighbor, the man whose car had nearly been stolen in broad daylight, wanted to end it now. That conflict haunted me as the day dragged on. Danielle set up our dining table like a war room, maps and notes and feeds from every neighbor camera that had captured suspicious trucks in the past month. She was meticulous, her eyes sharp, her fingers moving fast across the keyboard. But then she stopped, her voice soft. "George," she said, "what if going after her pulls us in deeper than we're ready for?" Her words cut because they mirrored the fear I hadn't voiced. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were targets, and Karen wouldn't let this go. Late that night, a decision weighed heavy on me. I pulled out my phone and dialed an old contact. Harris, a younger FBI agent I'd worked with years ago. Sharp, relentless, but still green enough to believe in clean justice. When he picked up, I hesitated. Do I tell him everything? Do I drag him into this HOA madness? Finally, I said, "I need you to run a name for me." Frank Miller. City Inspector Greenfield. The pause on the other end told me enough. Harris knew the name. "George," he said carefully. "That's not someone you want to tangle with lightly. He's been on our radar before. Complaints, whispers, nothing that stuck. If he's tied to this Karen of yours, you've got a bigger problem than you think." My stomach turned. Bigger problem, as if I didn't already know. Sometimes the enemy you see isn't the real threat. It's the one hiding just behind them, pulling strings in the dark. The next day, I walked the neighborhood. Not for peace, but for proof. I asked neighbors quietly if they'd lost cars, if they'd had strange tickets appear, if trucks came in the night. Their answers painted a picture darker than I imagined. A teenager's first car gone. A landscaper's trailer vanished. Families too scared to speak out. Karen had turned Greenfield into her playground, and most people had let her, too afraid to resist. That was my breaking point. Seeing those faces, ordinary people who wanted nothing more than to live quietly, too scared to confront one woman. I felt guilt burn in me. Guilt that I had seen the signs early and ignored them. That I had paid the fines instead of standing up sooner. Guilt that it took my Tesla, my pride, to finally draw a line. That guilt shaped my next risky decision. I told Danielle we were going to bait them again. She argued, begged me to think twice. "George, they'll come harder next time. They'll be desperate, but desperation was what I wanted. Desperation makes people sloppy. Desperation makes conspiracies unravel. So I staged the Tesla again, this time with a slow leak, a low tire, a staged coolant puddle. A carefully crafted picture of disrepair. Danielle, though reluctant, helped rig the cameras inside, tiny, hidden, streaming to a secure server. And she built one more piece, a kill switch. One press, and the Tesla would die where it sat, immovable, inescapable. The plan wasn't just about catching Karen's goons. It was about catching Frank Miller, the inspector himself. If he tagged the car, if he put the city's seal on it, the conspiracy would be undeniable. And 2 mornings later, it happened. A white city sedan pulled up. A short, tired-looking man stepped out, clipboard in hand. He barely looked at the car before slapping an orange sticker on the window, 72-hour tow notice. His name badge was clear. Frank Miller. Danielle caught every angle. Neighbor cameras caught the rest. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof, but proof wasn't enough to ease the weight pressing on me. Watching him walk away, casual, bored, as if destroying lives was just paperwork, something inside me cracked. I wanted to confront him right there, slam his clipboard into the pavement, demand answers. Instead, I stood in the window, fists clenched, jaw tight, forcing myself to stay still. That night, I confessed to Danielle, "I don't know if I'm losing control. I don't know if I can keep playing by the rules when they're breaking them so easily." She touched my hand, her eyes steady. "George, the rules are why we'll win. But you can't lose yourself in the fight." Her words steadied me, but only for a moment. Because the clock was ticking. 72 hours until the tow. And I knew Karen wouldn't wait that long. The scariest moment isn't when the fight starts. It's when you know it's coming. And you can't stop it. On the third night, just after 2 a.m., headlights swept across my living room wall. The same rusty tow truck, the same 2 men. Only this time, their confidence was stronger, their voices louder. They believed the sticker made them untouchable. Ricky smashed the Tesla's passenger window. Glass shattered, echoing through the silent street. Mike hooked the chains. They laughed as they worked, joking on their radios. Danielle hit the stream button. The neighborhood lit up with comments. Tony's voice came through the feed, laughing in disbelief. I waited until the truck pulled into the intersection, the Tesla dragging behind, before I whispered, "Now." Danielle pressed the fob. The Tesla died instantly. Hazards flashing, wheels locked, a dead weight in the middle of the street under the brightest light on the block. The truck screeched, stuck, immovable. Ricky cursed. Mike slammed the steering wheel. Neighbors' lights clicked on, curtains pulled back. The stream exploded past 1,000 views. I dialed 911, my voice calm, almost cold. "Grand theft auto in progress. Intersection of Elm Street and Greenfield. You can't miss it." But as I hung up, I knew the stakes had just risen. This wasn't just about cars anymore. Karen wouldn't take this humiliation lightly, and Frank Miller wouldn't let his name surface without striking back. The fight had shifted, and the next move was theirs. The Tesla sat dead in the intersection, its hazard lights pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. Neighbors stood in their yards, some in pajamas, others clutching phones, faces lit by the glow of the live stream. Ricky and Mike circled the car, their confidence dissolving into panic as they realized it wasn't moving, no matter how hard they pulled or pushed. I stood at the edge of the street, silent, calm, watching them unravel under the weight of their own scheme. Karen wasn't there this time, but I could feel her presence anyway, like smoke you can't see but know is in the air. This was her plan, her pride, her operation. And tonight, it had stalled under 1,000 pairs of eyes. The deputies arrived fast, but they weren't alone. A black SUV pulled in behind the patrol cars, and when the door opened, I saw Harris. He stepped out, his face serious, his eyes searching until they landed on me. I hadn't expected him this soon. "The FBI must have been watching more closely than I thought." "George," he said, his tone calm but urgent, "we need to talk. Now!" I nodded. But my gaze stayed on Ricky and Mike as they were cuffed again, their resistance gone. They looked smaller this time, not like enforcers, but like men who had finally realized they were pawns in someone else's game. Inside my house, Harris spread files across our dining table, next to Danielle's laptop and her wall of notes. His voice was low, steady. "Frank Miller is worse than you think. He's been funneling violations across multiple neighborhoods. Dozens of shell companies. Karen isn't the first, and she won't be the last. You caught him in the act, but if we move too soon, he'll bury everything. We need leverage. We need a turning point." His words pressed heavy against me. Leverage meant waiting. Waiting meant giving Karen more room to strike. And I wasn't sure if Greenfield could survive another strike. Danielle leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "So what do we do in the meantime? Just let Karen keep terrorizing people? Let Frank cash in?" Harris hesitated. "We build, slowly, carefully. If we rush this, we lose." That's when the weight of choice hit me like a fist. Do I let the FBI handle it their way, methodical, patient, dragging out the pain of this neighborhood? Or do I force the issue, take a risk that might break everything but end it faster? Every fight reaches a point where patience feels like surrender, and action feels like a sin you can't take back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the shattered glass from the Tesla's window still crunching under my shoes, and stared at the glow of the hazard lights outside. Danielle sat beside me, silent, her hand resting on mine. It wasn't comfort. It was a reminder of what we stood to lose if I chose wrong. By morning, Karen made her move. Flyers appeared on every door, written in her clipped, precise style. Neighborhood safety meeting, emergency session. Residents must attend. She was spinning the story, painting herself as the victim, calling me the aggressor. The flyers said nothing about the crowbar, nothing about the fake cops. They dripped with blame, and worse, some neighbors believed them. I saw the looks as I walked past houses, whispers behind curtains. Truth didn't always matter when fear was louder. That afternoon, Tony came by again. His phone shook in his hands as he played a clip. Karen, in her driveway, screaming into her phone, her voice tight with fury. "I don't care what it takes. Get rid of him. Him, the car, everything. Do you understand?" Everything. The words froze me. Not just anger. A threat, direct, clear. I looked at Danielle. Her face was pale, her lips pressed thin. "George," she whispered, "she's not going to stop. She's going to come for us." That night, I made the decision. No more waiting. No more patience. If Karen wanted a confrontation, she was going to get one. The clubhouse meeting was packed. Neighbors sat in folding chairs, the air thick with unease. Karen stood at the front, visor perched, tablet in hand, speaking like a queen addressing her court. She painted me as a menace, a bully in a badge, claiming I had attacked her security team unprovoked. People shifted uncomfortably, torn between her words and what they had seen on the stream. I stepped inside late, deliberately. The room hushed. All eyes turned. Karen froze mid-sentence, her smile faltering. I walked to the front, calm, slow, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I set a single object on the table in front of her. The crowbar Ricky had swung at me, tagged and released as evidence. Its steel gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "This," I said quietly, "is the truth." The room rippled with whispers. Karen's face twisted, but her voice shot out sharp. "That proves nothing." "He planted it! He staged everything!" I didn't argue. I just looked at the neighbors, meeting their eyes one by one. "You all saw it. You all know. This isn't about me or my car. This is about someone who believes the rules don't apply to her." Karen's mask cracked. She slammed her tablet down, her voice shrill. "You think you can scare me with props and speeches? You're finished here, George. I'll see to it myself." That's when Harris stepped inside. He wasn't in a suit tonight. He looked like any other neighbor. But his eyes met mine, and I knew he had seen enough. There comes a moment when lies collapse under their own weight, and the truth cuts sharper than any blade. After the meeting, the clubhouse buzzed with whispers, neighbors torn between fear and relief. Karen stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. I followed her to the parking lot where her fuchsia golf cart sat parked illegally in front of a fire hydrant. The hypocrisy was almost laughable. "Karen," I called. She spun, her face twisted with rage. "You think you've won something?" she hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. You're not fighting me. You're fighting the system, and the system always wins." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, because she was right about one thing. It wasn't just her. It was Frank. It was the shell companies. It was a web bigger than Greenfield. And standing there, under the parking lot lights, I felt the crushing weight of that truth. Danielle's voice echoed in my head, "Don't lose yourself." But I was losing pieces already. Each confrontation, each decision chipped away at who I thought I was. I wasn't just a marshal anymore. I was a neighbor dragged into a war no one else wanted to fight. That night, I sat alone in the driveway staring at the Tesla. Its broken window had been replaced. Its shine restored, but it no longer looked like a prize. It looked like bait. Like a trap that had pulled me deeper than I intended. And then I saw it, a shadow moving across the lawn. I stood, every muscle tensing, but it wasn't Karen. It wasn't Ricky. It was Harris. He held out a folder, his face grim. "We've got Miller," he said. "Venmo records, cash drops, everything." "But George—" He hesitated, his eyes heavy. "Karen's not just a pawn. She's deeper in this than we thought. She's funding part of it. Which means if we take her down, we light up the whole network." His words felt like both a gift and a curse. Proof, but also responsibility. If we moved now, we risked everything. Our safety, our neighborhood, maybe even the case itself. I looked at Danielle, standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Her eyes asked the question she didn't want to say aloud. "Are you going to risk us for this?" I swallowed hard, the weight of the decision pressing on my chest. Harris waited. Danielle waited. The night air hung thick with silence. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between what you can live with and what you can't. I took the folder. My hands shook as I held it, knowing that opening it meant stepping past a line I could never return from. It meant war, not just with Karen, but with the network she belonged to. And in that moment, under the dim porch light, with Danielle's eyes on me and Harris waiting, I opened it. Inside were names, dates, transactions. Proof that Karen wasn't just the face of this corruption, she was its heart. And by holding it in my hands, I knew I had just crossed into a fight that couldn't be undone. The air felt colder, the night darker, the silence heavier. The turning point had arrived and there was no way back. The folder felt heavier than it should have, the pages inside thick with names, transactions, and connections that stretched far beyond Greenfield. I sat at the table with Danielle and Harris, the weight of what I had just opened pressing down like a stone on my chest. The Tesla sat silent outside, its polished body catching the glow of the streetlight, but I barely noticed. Everything I thought I knew about Karen was shifting under me. She wasn't just a tyrant in a pink visor who loved rules more than people. She was a central piece in something bigger, something I hadn't seen coming. Danielle leaned over my shoulder, her breath shallow as she scanned the records. "George, these payments, they aren't just to Miller." She pointed at a column of names. "These are homeowners, people right here in Greenfield. They've been paying into this scheme too." My stomach dropped. I read through the list, recognizing names of neighbors I'd waved to, shared block parties with, even helped move furniture for when they first arrived. Some were small payments, others larger, but they were consistent, steady. It wasn't everyone, just a few. Enough to make me realize the corruption hadn't just infected Karen, it had spread into the neighborhood itself. I slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing in the kitchen. Danielle flinched. Harris stayed calm, his voice steady. "This isn't unusual. People buy safety. They think paying the fee means Karen leaves them alone, or Miller looks the other way on their violations. They justify it however they want. But the truth is they're part of it." I stared at him. "Part of it? They're our neighbors. Families. These are people who've been at our table, who've smiled at Danielle in the grocery store." "They chose," Harris said firmly. "And choices have consequences." The words hit me like a slap. Choices. Consequences. How many times had I told fugitives that exact same thing as I cuffed them? And now here I was, realizing the very people I thought I was protecting had been feeding. The beast all along. The deepest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you thought stood beside you. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Quieter. Colder. People avoided my eyes when I walked past. Conversations cut off when I came near. Danielle noticed it too. "They're scared," she whispered, but I wasn't sure if it was fear of Karen or fear of me. That afternoon, Tony knocked on my door. For a moment, I felt relief. Tony had always been the watcher, the one neighbor who seemed to care about truth. But when he stepped inside, his face looked different, nervous, guarded. He held his phone out again, but this time the footage he played wasn't of Karen. It was of me. The video was from the night in the street when Ricky swung the crowbar. The angle was sharp, caught from Tony's porch camera, but it told a different story. It cut right before Ricky raised the weapon, making it look like I had struck first, unprovoked. The comments flooding beneath the video were ugly. Accusations, doubts, people saying I had staged it all. I looked at Tony, my voice low. Why would you show me this? He swallowed hard. Because people are talking, George. They don't know what to believe anymore. And I think Karen got to them. She's twisting the story. And if you're not careful, you'll lose the neighborhood before you even win the case. I wanted to believe Tony was warning me. But the way his eyes darted, the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, told me something else. He wasn't just a messenger. He was wavering. That night, Danielle and I argued for the first time in weeks. She wanted me to stay calm, to let the FBI handle it. But my blood boiled with the thought of being painted as the villain while Karen twisted truth into lies. If I don't fight this myself, I snapped, we lose everything. Danielle's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. If you keep fighting like this, George, we lose ourselves. Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Because part of me feared she was right. The next day brought the twist I wasn't ready for. Harris returned, his face grim, his tone clipped. George, we've got a problem. One of the names in that folder, one of the payoffs, belongs to someone you know. He slid a paper across the table. My heart nearly stopped when I saw it. Danielle, not her full name, but her maiden name. A transaction from years ago tied to an old address. My mind spun. I looked at her, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It's not what it looks like, she whispered, her voice shaking. George, please, I need to explain. I stared at her, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, the woman who had stood beside me in every fight. My chest felt like it was caving in. Explain? My voice cracked, sharper than I intended. Because it looks like you've been part of this all along. Tears slid down her face. When I was younger, before we met, I lived in another community. They had a Karen, too. I paid once, just once, because I didn't know what else to do. I was scared, George. And I thought it was over. I thought it was in the past. The room spun around me. My instincts screamed at me to stay calm, to listen. But the betrayal twisted like a knife. The woman I had built my life with, my safe place, had once played into the very system I was fighting. Sometimes the truth doesn't shatter the enemy. It shatters the people you love most. I left the house that night. I couldn't stay, not with the weight of that revelation pressing against me. I walked the streets, past houses dark and silent, past the clubhouse where Karen had ruled, past the hydrant where her golf cart had once been towed. The neighborhood no longer felt like home. It felt like a battlefield, and as I walked, a car slowed beside me. The window rolled down. Karen's face appeared, half lit by the dashboard glow, her smirk sharper than ever. You see it now, don't you? She said softly, almost kindly. It's not about cars or fines. It's about people. They'll always choose comfort over truth. They'll pay me before they stand with you. And even your wife isn't as clean as you thought. Her words cut deeper than the crowbar ever had. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. Danielle's confession, the neighbor's silence, Tony's hesitation, it all pointed to the same truth. Fear was more powerful than justice. Karen's car rolled away, her laughter echoing down the street. I stood frozen, torn between rage and despair. For the first time, I wondered if I was losing. The following morning, Harris delivered another blow. George, the FBI's pulling me back. Higher-ups want to slow-roll this case. They're worried it'll collapse if we move too fast, which means you're on your own for now. The words hollowed me out. On my own. Again. I returned home to Danielle, who stood waiting in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. She reached for me, but I pulled back. George, she pleaded, I didn't lie to you. I never hid this on purpose. I never thought it would matter again. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to forgive. But the wound was too raw, the trust too shaken. I grabbed my keys and walked out, the slam of the door echoing through the house. That night, I sat in the Tesla parked at the end of Elm Street. The car that once symbolized pride now felt like a cage, locking me into choices I couldn't escape. I stared at the crowbar resting on the passenger seat, the steel glinting faintly under the moonlight. A reminder of violence, a reminder of truth. Every story reaches a point where the hero isn't sure if he's still the hero or if he's becoming the thing he swore to fight. And then, as if the night hadn't already broken me enough, my phone buzzed. A message. Anonymous. Just 3 words. We see you. I looked around the dark street, heart pounding, every shadow suddenly alive. Someone was watching. Maybe Karen, maybe Miller, maybe someone I hadn't even considered yet. The folder, Danielle's confession, the neighbor's silence, Tony's wavering, all of it pressed down at once. I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Not the FBI, not my neighbors, not even the woman I loved. The fight had twisted into something darker, something I couldn't undo. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to face it. The message glared back at me from my phone screen. We see you. The words pulsed in the dark like a brand against my skin. I sat frozen in the Tesla, gripping the steering wheel even though the car wasn't moving, every shadow outside alive with suspicion. I scanned the street, porch lights flickering on one by one, blinds twitching, silence thicker than fog. Whoever sent that message wasn't bluffing. I was being watched, and I had no idea from where. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on gravel. The air was still too still. I walked to the center of the street, every muscle tense, every instinct alive, and called out into the dark. Enough! If you've got something to say it now. No answer, only silence. A silence so sharp it hurt my ears. And in that silence, I felt the weight of everything. Karen's smirk, Harris pulling back, Tony's doubt, Danielle's confession. The truth was circling me like wolves. I went back inside, the slam of the door louder than I meant it to be. Danielle was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale. She had seen the message, too. It flashed across her phone as well. George, she whispered, they're tightening around us. I didn't answer. I dropped the crowbar onto the table, the sound metallic, final. Her eyes flinched at the sight of it, as if it carried more than steel. It carried everything that had happened since this began. That night I didn't sleep. I watched the cameras, the streams, the endless chatter online. And somewhere around 3 a.m., I made my decision. It was time to end this. No more waiting. No more playing by Karen's script. I was going to confront her face to face with the whole neighborhood as witness. The following evening, I called my own meeting. No flyers, no printed lies. Just a message sent through streams, texts, and word of mouth. If you want the truth, meet at the clubhouse tonight. When I walked into the clubhouse, it was packed. Neighbors filled every chair, lining the walls, standing in corners. The air was thick with tension, the hum of whispers filling the room. At the front, Karen stood with her arms crossed, visor angled low, her smirk daring me to try. I walked straight to the table, set the folder down, and opened it. The papers spread like fire across the wood, transactions, payments, names. And then, slowly, I lifted the crowbar and set it beside them. The room went quiet. The kind of silence that tells you everyone is holding their breath. This, I said, my voice steady, is the truth. Not my truth. Not Karen's. The truth. I looked at the neighbors one by one. Faces I'd known for years. People I'd helped, laughed with, trusted. You've all seen enough to know what's real. You've seen the fake cops, the attacks, the lies, and now you see this. She isn't protecting this neighborhood. She's draining it. Karen's laugh cut through the room, sharp and cruel. And you think they'll believe you? She spat. You think some papers and a broken tool are enough? Look at him. She pointed at me, her voice rising. A man who hides behind a badge, who plays the hero while terrorizing his own neighbors. He's the danger here, not me. I could see fear flicker in the crowd. Doubt. She knew how to use it. And for a moment I felt the ground slipping beneath me. But then Danielle stood. Her voice shook at first, but she forced it steady. I was scared once. I paid into a system like this because I thought it was the only way. I thought silence was safer than truth. But silence is what let this happen here. And I won't stay silent anymore. Her words cracked something open in the room. Murmurs rose, neighbors shifting, some nodding, some whispering. Karen's smirk faltered just for a second. And then Tony stood too. His voice was shaky, his eyes on me. I doubted him. I even thought maybe he staged it. But I saw the payments, Karen. You've been bleeding us dry while telling us it was for our good. I won't cover for you anymore, the room erupted. Voices rose, questions hurled, neighbors demanding answers. Karen tried to shout over them, but for the first time, she wasn't being heard. The power she held with fear was cracking, breaking under the weight of truth. When fear loses its grip, the truth doesn't just speak, it roars. Karen slammed her tablet shut and stormed toward the door, but I blocked her path. My voice was low, calm. No more running. No more hiding. Tonight it ends. The room froze. Neighbors crowded the doorway, blocking her exit. Harris appeared at the back, his face grim. He had come after all, watching silently as the scene unfolded. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. And then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh. You think you've won? You haven't even scratched the surface. You don't know who you're really fighting. The words struck like lightning. The neighbors fell silent, fear returning like a wave. Karen leaned closer, her whisper meant for me but heard by everyone. Frank was just the beginning. There are others. And when they come, you won't even see it until it's too late. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking into my bones. This wasn't just about Greenfield. It was bigger, deeper, darker. And she was right. I didn't know the full extent. The scariest enemy isn't the one standing in front of you. It's the one you don't even know exists yet. The deputies arrived then, slipping through the crowd, hands firm as they cuffed Karen. Her visor slipped to the floor, forgotten. Neighbors gasped, some relieved, some horrified. She was led out into the night, her voice sharp as she called back, "This isn't over, George." It never ends. Silence hung heavy after she was gone. The neighbors looked at me, some with gratitude, others with fear. Danielle moved to my side, her hand slipping into mine. For a moment, I let myself breathe. The fight we had carried for weeks, maybe months, was finally breaking open. But Harris stayed at the back, his face unreadable. When the room cleared, he pulled me aside. His voice was low, serious. She wasn't bluffing. We've traced some of the names in that folder. This goes beyond Miller, beyond Karen. You've stumbled into something bigger than you realize, George. And now they know your name. The relief I felt moments earlier drained out of me. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night back home, Danielle and I sat together in the quiet. For the first time in days, she leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood up when no one else would." But I couldn't shake the echo of Karen's words. You don't know who you're really fighting. I walked outside, the cool air biting against my skin. The Tesla gleamed in the driveway, silent, unmoved. I stared at it, at the crowbar still lying in the garage, at the shadows stretching across the street. And in that stillness, a realization hit me. The fight wasn't about the car or the fines or even Karen. It was about power. About how far people will go to keep it, and how much you risk losing when you dare to challenge it. Sometimes victory doesn't feel like winning. It feels like standing on the edge of something darker, knowing the storm hasn't even started yet. And as I turned back toward the house, my phone buzzed again. Another message, different number. Same words. "We see you." The fight was far from over, and deep down I knew the worst was still to come. The final message, "We see you," never left me. It sat heavy in my chest long after Karen was led away in handcuffs, long after the neighbors drifted back into their homes, long after the clubhouse lights went dark. It was a reminder that victory is never clean, never final. You win a battle, but the war keeps moving, shifting in shadows you can't see. And I knew this one wasn't over. The neighborhood changed overnight. For some, the air felt lighter. They walked dogs with their heads held higher, no longer glancing over their shoulders for Karen's clipboard or Miller's notes. Kids rode bikes again, laughing too loudly in the cul-de-sacs as if the fear had lifted. But beneath that surface was something else, an unease that clung like smoke after a fire. The damage had been done. Trust was broken. Some families started talking about selling their homes, leaving Greenfield behind. Others kept their distance from me, afraid that standing too close would put a target on their backs. Tony stopped coming by. He waved from a distance but never crossed my driveway again. Maybe he felt guilty for wavering. Maybe he was afraid I'd never forgive him. I didn't blame him. Some betrayals, even small ones, stay lodged like splinters. Harris checked in once more before leaving town. He stood in my kitchen, arms crossed, his voice lower than usual. "George, Karen will talk." She'll give us names. But this network, this thing you've stumbled into, it doesn't end here. You need to be ready. I nodded, but inside I felt hollow. Ready? Maybe, but at what cost? Danielle and I carried the biggest cost between us. The folder had ripped something open that couldn't be closed. Her confession about the past was still raw, and though I tried, I couldn't unhear it. Some nights we sat together in silence, holding hands like nothing had changed. Other nights we barely looked at each other, the quiet between us filled with everything we weren't saying. Love was still there, but trust, it takes longer to rebuild than a house after a storm. The Tesla remained in the driveway, its silver body catching the sun each morning like a mirror reflecting all we had lost and all we had fought for. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a reminder of the war that had come to our doorstep. Every time I looked at it, I thought of Ricky's crowbar, of Karen's smirk, of neighbors whispering behind curtains. It was beautiful still, but beauty doesn't erase scars. Weeks passed. The HOA was dismantled piece by piece. Emergency elections held, rules rewritten, the old fines erased. Neighbors cheered, but I watched from a distance. I knew better than to think paperwork could fix fear. You can replace a board, but you can't erase the memory of its power. Some wounds stay long after the signatures dry. Late one evening, Danielle and I walked the quiet street together. The cicadas hummed, the air heavy with the smell of cut grass. We didn't talk much. Words had grown fragile between us. But when we passed the clubhouse, its windows dark and empty, she stopped. "It feels different now," she said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, different, but not done." She slipped her hand into mine, not with certainty, but with hope. And maybe that was enough. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't loud or clear. They're quiet, fragile, and still unfinished. A month later, the FBI press release went public. Miller was indicted. Several other inspectors, too. Karen's name wasn't in the headlines, but I knew she had been the spark that lit the fuse. The neighbors celebrated online, posting links, commenting on how justice had finally come. But I stayed quiet. Justice doesn't erase nights of doubt. It doesn't mend broken trust. It just moves the pieces a little closer to balance. The last time I saw Karen was in court. She looked smaller, her visor gone, her hair pulled back, eyes empty. When she turned and saw me in the gallery, she smirked one last time as if to say, "You didn't beat me. You just survived me." And maybe that was true. Survival has its own kind of victory. After the hearing, I drove home, the road stretching empty under a gray sky. When I pulled into Greenfield, the kids were playing again, chalk drawings across the sidewalks. The neighborhood looked normal, ordinary. But I knew better. The truth doesn't just disappear. It lingers, woven into the cracks of driveways, hidden behind freshly painted fences. That night, I sat in the Tesla with the windows down, the cool air brushing across my face. Danielle brought me coffee and sat beside me, quiet, watching the stars. Neither of us spoke, but for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like space to heal. I thought about everything we had lost, everything we had gained. The price was high: trust, safety, peace. But in its place was something harder, sharper, clarity. I knew now what power looked like when it twisted itself into lies. I knew how fear could make good people choose silence. And I knew how fragile justice could be, how it depended on ordinary people, refusing to bow. The real story of Greenfield wasn't about an HOA or a car. It was about how much you risk losing when you decide the truth is worth more than comfort. The weeks turned to months. Life found its rhythm again. New faces moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the storm that had torn through before them. Old faces moved away, their houses sold, their stories buried. And me, I stayed. Not because it was easy, but because leaving would have meant Karen won in the end. Some nights, I still catch myself looking at the shadows too long, wondering if another message will come. "We see you." Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But I know one thing now: I won't run. Not from messages, not from smirks, not from fear. And as I sit here now telling you this story, I realize something else. The real cost wasn't just in the battles we fought, it was in the way those battles changed us. Danielle and I are still here, scarred but standing. The Tesla is still in the driveway, dented but shining. And the truth is still in Greenfield, whether people want to face it or not. The fight left marks on the neighborhood, on us, on me. But scars aren't just reminders of pain. They're proof you survived it. And survival, in the end, is its own kind of victory. Sometimes the strongest ending isn't about winning or losing. It's about knowing you faced the storm and refused to disappear. As the night deepens, I look out across the quiet street, the porch lights glowing like beacons. Greenfield is different now. Not perfect, not healed, but awake. And maybe that's enough. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you of the fights you've faced in your own neighborhoods, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to my channel, HOA Truth Tales. Share this story, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the truth alive together. Because as long as there are people willing to stand, the fight never really ends. And with that, I close my eyes and let the night settle. The Tesla's quiet hum, the only sound left, a symbol not of what I owned, but of what I refused to surrender.